Some time ago I was on a long flight on an airplane. Having finished my book and not wishing to engage in idle conversation with the person next to me, I thought that the time might be better spent with a story from the classics. This comes from the Arabian Nights, and it is the tale of three sisters, and it begins thus. Once upon a time, there were three sisters. These sisters were not wealthy, they were not famous, and they were not particularly happy about their lot in life. And so one night they came together before a lamp and they were talking with each other about what they would truly wish for their life. Little known to them, outside their home, stalking in the streets dressed in the rags of a commoner, was the emperor himself, Kunu Shah, emperor of all Persia, and with him his grand vizier, as it was their habit to go among their streets and people and to find what was going on in their vast kingdom. And so while they stopped by the home of these three sisters, they heard them talking. And they heard the sisters discussing what it was that they would like for their lives. So the oldest of the sisters, she says, "Well, if I could have anything that I should want in all my life, I would like to be married to the Sultan's baker, and that way every day I would have the most wonderful things to eat, sweet pies and cakes and all of the delicacies of his kitchen, and they would be brought to me by my husband, who would be working in the emperor's own palace, and this would make my life perfect." Not to be outdone, the middle sister said, "Well, you wish for the Sultan's baker, but I wish for his butcher. If I had the butcher for my husband, then I would eat nothing but the finest of meats. I would be having the same kinds of things that the Sultan himself would eat, and my life would be wonderful. My husband would be in a place close to the emperor himself, and all things in my life would be in order." The younger sister, hearing her older sister's wishes, cast them aside and laughed. The sisters asked her, "Dear younger sister, what is it that you should wish, that you should laugh so at our wishes?" And the younger sister, she replied, "Why, if we should choose people from the palace to have as our husbands, why should I want the baker or the butcher? Why, if I were to have anyone to myself, I would have the Sultan himself, and I would be queen, and I would bear for this man a beautiful child with hair of gold on one side and silver on the other. His tears would be pearls, and his smile would be vermilion, and I would raise him up to be an emperor, and he would be mightier than all the kings of the earth." And the sisters laughed in scorn at their sister, but secretly outside the Grand Vizier winked to the Sultan himself as they stood there in the streets, and they conspired to make these wishes come true. So the very next day, the emperor of all Persia, Kunu Shah, brought forth these three women. He sent a detachment to fetch them from their home and bring them before him. And so there they stood in the throne hall of the palace, terrified at the feet of the emperor. "Forgive us, Emperor. We did not know that we had offended you. What could be the trouble?" they all wondered. They were in fear for their lives, standing in this solemn court surrounded by all of the people in their finery. And so it was that the emperor saw them shake in fear, and especially he saw the beauty of the youngest daughter, the youngest sister, and he said, "Fear not, I have not come to punish you. I have come to make your wishes come true, for it's come to my ear that you have wished to have husbands from within the palace." "Oh, sire," the sisters fell upon themselves. They were in terror. "We did not mean to mock. We did not mean to presume. You must forgive us. We spoke out of turn. We did not know that we were overheard." But the emperor would have none of it. He said, "Nonsense, I have not come to punish you, as I've said. Instead, I have come to fulfill your wishes. For, as it is, both my baker and my butcher are without wives, and as you can see, I myself have no queen. And so this very day it will be done, that you," he said to the older sister, "you will be wed to my baker, and you shall have your wish come true. And to you," he said to the middle sister, "you this very day shall be wed to my butcher, and your wishes shall come true." And then he turned to the younger sister. He said to her, Beautiful girl, if it is still your wish that you should be my wife, I shall make it true this very day." And she was overjoyed. So it was that in time all of the due solemnities and formalities of a royal wedding were prepared, and this common girl was brought to the palace to be the queen. She was beautiful and loved by all, and most of all by the emperor himself, and he thought of her as his greatest delight. And so, in time, this young girl, having been made queen and empress over all of Persia, it came to pass that she was pregnant. She was going to give birth to a child soon. And this caused much consternation to her older sisters, who had found their station somewhat less than that of the queen. And they came together over laundry, just the two of them, to converse about the situation of their younger sister. And they said one to the other, "See how she holds herself high, see how she's proud, see how she's happy, and whereas we still do our laundry, here we are, wed to this baker and this butcher, and what have we got for all of this? Look at how her station is so much greater than ours, and yet she is the younger. What shall we do?" And they conspired. They said, "We shall be her midwives. We shall get close to her, and then we shall enact a vengeance upon her for her pride and her haughtiness, and for her disdain of her older sisters." Although in truth she held no disdain for her older sisters. The queen was widely known as being compassionate and kind and wonderful to all in her kingdom. And so, when it was time for the birth, the older sisters used their privilege as her sister to escort all of the other people out of that part of the palace and to act as her special midwife. And these two sisters conspired that when she did give birth to a wonderful baby boy, that they wrapped it instead, put it into a basket, and sent it on its way down the river. And instead, they replaced the baby with a small dead dog. And this they presented to the emperor. The emperor was absolutely furious at finding that instead of giving birth to a son, a beautiful child as she had promised and they had both so desired, that instead he was told here by the authority of her own sisters that she had given birth to this monstrous being, a small dead dog, instead. And the emperor was very upset, and he was inclined to punish his own queen for having brought such a monster into the world. But the Grand Vizier prevailed upon him and said, "Sire, this is indeed a strange event, but perhaps the queen should not be punished. Such things are marvels of nature, and we should forgive her. It's not her fault." And so the emperor relented, and everything went back to the way that it had been. Meanwhile, the child floated down the stream, and there he found himself in the gardens of the attendant of the emperor's gardens. And this was an older man who had been taking care of the gardens for many years, since the days of the sultan's father. And this attendant of the gardens as yet had no children of his own. So he took the child in, and he decided with his wife to raise it as his own. And he named him Bahman, after one of the ancient kings of Persia. And the child grew up with the attendant of the gardens. Meanwhile, as time passed, the queen again became pregnant. And again the sisters conspired against her, so that when she gave birth this time, they had wrapped up the body of a cat, and presented that to the emperor, and again sent the child, another boy, down the stream, same as before. This time the emperor was furious, for not only had she delivered one dead animal, she had delivered two. And again the same scene played out, with the vizier exonerating the queen, and the child being sent down the river, again to be picked up by the attendant of the emperor's gardens, and adopted as his own. This child he named Perviz, after another of the ancient emperors of Persia. And so the sisters conspired to keep the queen in her misery, and she was very much terrified, and they took her to all manner of counselors, and all manner of soothsayers, and medicine practitioners, and anyone they could, so that when again she became pregnant, that she would be assured of having more fortune. But it was not to be, for when again she became pregnant, and this time she gave birth to a little girl, the sisters conspired to wrap the child in a blanket in a basket, send it down the river again, and they replaced it with a piece of wood. The emperor could tolerate no more. He suspected the queen of witchcraft. He suspected her of treachery, of deceiving him, of anything other than having been the misfortune of being conspired against by her sisters. So the emperor condemned the queen to be put to public humiliation, and he had a hovel built for her. He had her to live in this hovel in a public square, and that everyone who should pass by would have to spit on her according to the law of the emperor, and any that refused to spit upon her very face would that very day be subject to the same punishment, be confined to a cell in public and subjected to ridicule. And so it was done. The beautiful little queen was put into a cell in public and kept there with the most meager of conditions and the most rancid food presented to her every day. Meanwhile, the little girl went down the stream, and she was raised again by the attendant of the emperor's gardens and his wife, who were becoming elderly by now. They took in the little girl, and they named her Parizada, after one of the empresses of ancient Persia. And so life went on for many years. Eventually, the attendant of the emperor's garden had passed away, having raised these children with all of the arts and sciences that he had known. They had such a wonderful and beautiful garden, and with such wonderful help to raise the garden, it had become quite a wonder in the world. And so it was that they were very proud of it. Bahman and Perviz would go out hunting, and the princess, not knowing she was a princess, Parizada, would keep the gardens, and they were beautiful and known all over the empire for their beauty and their wonder. And so it was that they thought that there was nothing in their house that they could possibly be lacking, and no joy should be spared from them. But one day, as there was a caravan passing through, a little old lady came into the house, and she had seen the wonderful gardens, and she had seen the wonderful house, and she said to them all, "Yes, indeed, this is a wonderful place." The princes excused themselves to go hunting and riding, and she was left alone with Parizada. And Parizada said, "Dear woman, it seems that something is troubling you, for it seems that your face has nervousness, a downcast to it. What is it that could possibly be troubling you?" And the old lady said, "My dear girl, this palace is wonderful indeed. You have a beautiful home, and beautiful gardens, well-kept lands. But there are 3 things that you lack before you would achieve perfection in this home. And without these things, your home could not possibly be perfect. You could not possibly even be happy without these 3 things." "Nonsense," thought Parizada. "I'm perfectly happy in my home. I'm perfectly happy with the way that things are. This old woman must be crazy." But still, she was hospitable, and she asked the old lady, "What could these 3 things be that my home lacks?" The little old lady, with crafty gleam in her eye, said, "Dear girl, the 3 things that you lack are the speaking bird, the golden water, and the singing tree." Parizada had never heard of these things before. She had never even thought that they might be missing from her home, and yet the idea troubled her, that there were indeed wonders in the world that had not come to her, of which she was yet unaware, and most especially that were not part of her house. And so she asked the woman, "Where in all of the world would one find such a wonder as these? Where could I possibly go to discover such things?" The old woman said, 20 days' journey to the east, on the only road that leads out of the empire, far to the east of Persia. After 20 days you will come to a man seated on the top of a hill, an ancient guru, and there, if you would ask him, he would tell you how to obtain these things." Parizade thanked the woman. The woman went on her way. And all day and all night Parizade thought about these wonders, and how she should have them, and how if they were simply to be obtained by asking an old man sitting on top of a hill, that anyone should have them, and why they would not be claimed. And the thought troubled her that something so easily grasped would not be hers, had not been hers, and could not ever be hers, unless she should take the initiative to go and obtain them. And so it was that she thought and thought over it, and passed her days in misery, thinking about how she would never obtain the things that she so desired, because the effort to obtain them was so difficult. And so her brothers prevailed upon her. "Dear sister, what is it that is troubling you? We see that you've been upset these past days. Please tell us what we can do to make things better for you." And she said, "My brothers, I have heard from an old woman that there are 3 wonders which our house lacks, and they are obtainable, and I know the way to obtain them, but I lack the means to obtain them, for I have not the skill nor the determination to travel 20 days toward India to find these wonderful things." The brothers laughed. "Such an adventure is nothing to us. I could ride out there and find it. Let's go and get these things for you, sister." "No, no," the sister protested. "You must not go, because if something were to happen to you both along the way, then who would I be left with? I would have nothing here and no one to help me. I would have no one to protect me, and I would be alone and miserable, and for all the world and anything that I might lack currently, I could not be without you." So Bahman, the eldest, decided that he alone would go. "No, no, no, you cannot go," the princess told him, not knowing, of course, that she was the princess, nor that he was the prince. And she said to him, "You can't go, because I would fear too much for you. 20 days is a long journey, practically to the ends of the earth, and how would I know how you fare?" And he said to her, "Dear sister, here is how you will know how I fare." And he gave her a string of pearls, and he said to her, "Run these pearls through your fingers every day, and if it should happen that on one day while running the pearls through your fingers that they should not run, but instead remain stiff, then you will know that I have perished, and you can grieve for me at that time. But until then, run these pearls through your fingers and know that I am fine." And so he presented her with this fine strand of pearls, equipped himself, and set out for his journey. After 20 days, he did indeed find a man, an old, old man, sitting on top of a hill. He marched up to the man, and he found him sitting there, wearing nothing but a shawl, and he saw that the man's face was covered. He asked the man, I'm looking for something very special, and I thought that perhaps you might be the one to tell me how to find it." But the old man could not reply, because his beard and his mustache and his hair were so caked with dirt and mud and fallen into his face that he could barely be heard or understood through all of it. So Bahman dismounted, went over to the old man, cut the hair free from his face, and said, "Now, please be kind enough to tell me where I might find such a wonder as this speaking bird, the golden water, or the singing tree." "Aha!" the old man said. "I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you for a long time. But you see, you are not the first to attempt to obtain these treasures. Many, many have gone before you, and all have failed, and all of them now lie perished upon the mountain yonder." He pointed to a mountain across the way. "For you see, if you walk this mountain, there's a path that leads deep into the mountain, and there you'll find beside you stones. These stones are all the stones that are made from people who had tried to find these treasures before. For if once you have found the treasures you turn back and turn around and are frightened, then you will become a stone just as them. And so I warn you, though you might be brave, you should abandon this quest. You should leave it, return to your home, live a happy life with your family. Do not become one with the stones up there on the mountain like all of these others." Bahman laughed at the old man. "No, no, no. You've given me good counsel, so all I must do is not turn around in fear, but proceed onward to my goal. Well, I've been coming this way for 20 days now. I shouldn't have any fear now. Thank you. Just go on up the hill now." So Bahman turned around, much to the protest of the old man, and went up into the hills. As he walked, the trail became desolate, and there was nothing beside him but man-sized stones on either side of the trail, leading upward to something he could barely tell what. And no sooner had he started walking among the stones than he heard voices calling out to him, "Fool! Traitor! Coward!" And at this, Bahman, who was very brave and who prided himself on his bravery, turned around to face his accuser, for he was not a coward at all. And at that point, when he turned around, he did, in fact, become a stone and join the others. At this very moment, Parizada was handling the pearls, nervously, worried about her brother. And then the pearls stopped. They were clogged upon the string. They would not turn nor move. She cried out in despair, for she knew exactly what had happened. And then Perviz had heard her and came in to comfort her. "What is it, dear sister? What has happened?" She explained the pearls, that they did not turn, they did not move, and she knew that Bahman, their older brother, had perished along the path. "Fear not, sister," said Perviz. "I myself will go, and I will rescue him. I will return with him, with or without the treasures. I will bring Bahman back to us, and you will have no more fear." But Parizada persisted. "No, no, no, we've lost Bahman. I cannot lose you too. You must not do this. We must grieve for him and let it be done, and think no more on these silly treasures." But Perviz, he persisted as well. "No, no, dear sister." And to this he pulled out a dagger. He said, "Every day slice yourself a piece of bread with this dagger. And if some day it should not slice the bread, for it is a very sharp dagger, then you will know that I myself have perished. But I will go, and I will find Bahman, and I will return with him, treasure or no." And so, with no further words, Perviz mounted his saddle and set off on the trail toward India. 20 days he traveled, until again he came to the same old man. The same old man said to him, "No, no, my son, you must not go up this hill. You must not seek out these treasures. Many brave men have come. Many brave men have died." But Perviz would hear none of it. "Sorry, old man, I must go. You see, my brother has come, and I must rescue him." And the old man said, "He is beyond help. He has become a stone on the hill, and so shall you if you would go to follow him." But Perviz persisted. There must be some way to return with him. The old man said, "No, no, he has become a stone. You could not even lift him. He is quite large. Like all the rest, you will see, and you too will join them if you go and seek these treasures." Perviz thought much about it, and he thought, well, if I cannot return with Bahman, if he is indeed perished and become a stone, the least that I could do would be to obtain the treasures. And so he asked the old man again, "What should I do? How should I obtain it?" The old man said, "Go up the trail, follow the path, and turn not to the right nor to the left, nor turn around in fear at all that might trouble you. And if you can make it up the hill and find the end of the path, then you will obtain the treasures." There was nothing to it, Perviz thought, turned around, and galloped off toward the trail. As he went off up the mountain, he saw, as Bahman had, the many black stones surrounding him, all the size of men, and he knew what would happen if he would turn around. I must not think of it. And so up the hill he proceeded. And then he was hearing voices as well, and they said to him, "Fool and coward!" But Perviz was no fool, and he was no coward, and so he persisted up the hill. And then the voices said things like, "You are ugly! You are a bastard! You are nothing!" And Perviz was very proud of his bearing. He was of regal bearing, quite handsome, and he was offended to hear someone speak of him so, and so he turned around to correct this person, and in so doing he himself was turned into a stone. At this very time Parizada was cutting her bread, to make sure that her brother was okay, and she found out that as she cut the bread, the knife would not cut. The bread would not be cut, even by this sharp knife. And so she knew that her brothers both had perished along the trail. Without any further thought, she gathered herself together and packed herself a horse and went along the trail also on the way to India, until she herself came to the old man, and she said to him, "Old man, I have come for my brothers and for the 3 treasures. Tell me it is how that I may obtain them." And the old man said to her the same as he had said to her brothers, "Turn back, this is too dangerous, especially for one such as you." She said, "Nonsense, tell me the secret of finding the treasures." So he did. He told her, "Do not turn around in fear at what might befall you along the trail, or you will become one with the stones." And so she said, "The principal danger then lies in not turning off the path, nor turning around. This is not difficult." And so, in order to protect herself, she stuffed her ears with cotton, and walked up the hill, hearing these muffled sounds and cries and all manner of terrors surrounding her as she passed between the large black stones, until finally she came to the top of the hill, and there at the top of the hill, in a golden cage, she found a large bird. And the large bird looked at her with an intelligent eye, and it spoke to her. It said, "Turn around, go back the way that you'd come." Taking the cotton out of her ears, she said to the bird, "There is no way on the earth that I would turn around at this point, for now I have you, bird, and you are mine, and I will take you home with me. But first, you must tell me what I must do in order to obtain the golden water and the singing tree." And the bird said, "First take me with you, and we shall find the golden water." And when she picked up the bird from its cage, and she took it with her, he took her to a spring. And when she went to the spring, the bird said, "Take some of this water in a little vial, and as you take it with you, sprinkle it upon all of the stones that we shall pass, and you shall see a marvel." So a little of the golden water she took with her from the spring, and as they passed, she sprinkled it on all of the large black stones, and each time she would sprinkle it, it would become a rider, mounted, armed for adventure, and prepared to serve her, for she had set them free from years, decades, and sometimes centuries of being imprisoned in the stones, until at last she came to her 2 brothers, and she set them free as well. They went back to where the old man had sat on his hill, and there, instead of finding the old man, they found a tree, a strange tree, with strange leaves like they had never seen before, and as the wind passed through the tree, it made a sound, and this, they knew, must be the singing tree. The bird directed them to take a clipping of this tree, and the vial of water and itself, and to return to their place of residence, and so they did. They returned to their place of residence, where the bird directed Parizada to pour the golden water into her fountain, and when she did, the fountain sprang up gold, shining, sparkling like the sun, luminescent, and it shot high into the sky and was a wonder for all to see. They planted the singing tree. The singing tree became enormous very, very quickly. It became filled with birds, and as the wind and the birds moved around in the tree, it produced a music like no one had ever heard. And so they made a home in their house for the bird, and the bird would talk and give counsel. And so the bird had instructed that the 2 brothers one day should go out hunting, and the bird told them where it was that they should hunt. As it happened, while they were out hunting, the emperor himself was hunting in the same area. And he saw these 2 riders so magnificent in the way that they rode and the way that they shot that he admired them. He came to see them, and he said, "Good sirs, I see that you hunt well, you ride well, you have been raised and trained very well. I am impressed, and I would be most impressed if you would return with me to the palace, where you can tell me about yourselves, for I have never seen such as you in all my kingdom." And so Bahman and Perviz went home with the emperor, and there they had dinner with him and his grand vizier and his baker and his cook, and no one recognized them at all. And so it was that the emperor said, "Well, where is it that you have lived?" And they said, "We live in the estate of the attendant of the emperor's gardens, who is late in passing these many years." Yes," the emperor said, "I remember him. And you live there alone?" Bahman and Perviz protested, "No, we do not live there alone, but instead we stay with our sister." "You must bring her here," the emperor said, "for you have a wonderful family, and I would be delighted to meet you all." And so they said, "We promise we will tell her, and we will bring her here." And so Bahman and Perviz, they returned home. But on their way, in their talking, they had completely forgotten that they had promised to bring Parizade to the emperor. And so, later again, they went hunting in the same place, and again they found the emperor. And the emperor again invited them all to come, and again in returning home they had forgotten. And so in this time the emperor sent an envoy to them, and he said, "Prepare yourselves, prepare your very house, for since you cannot remember to bring yourselves to my presence, I will come to you, and I will visit you in your house, and see the wonders widely spoken of your garden and your home." And so Parizade asked the bird, "Bird, the emperor himself comes to dine with us. What shall we do to prepare for him?" And the bird said, "You must make a most unusual dish. You must take the knife that you had used to slice the bread in seeking your brother, and you must slice open a cucumber, and into the cucumber you must place the pearls that you had pulled through your hand when waiting for your brother, and you must place these in a dish before the emperor himself when he sits down to dine with you." And so it was that the emperor came to their house, and they showed him the many wonders of their home. They showed him the singing tree, which was a marvel for anyone to hear. They showed him the golden fountain shining and shooting far into the sky. And finally the emperor sat down to a meal. And what they presented him was no dish to eat, but a dish of cucumber stuffed with pearls. The emperor looked at it and marveled, and he said, "Of all of the strange marvels that I have seen today, this most especially perplexes me, a cucumber stuffed with pearls." And at this point, the speaking bird spoke out to the emperor, and the bird said, "Noble emperor, could it be that this is so shocking to you? Could it be that a simple cucumber stuffed with pearls is so strange to you, and yet you fail to recognize in those before you your very own sons and daughter, who were told to you were born a dog, a cat, and a piece of wood? How could you not believe a cucumber with pearls when standing before you is the family that you had lost?" And at this the emperor marveled. He looked up, and he said, "I can hardly believe it. A talking bird!" And at this all had marveled and laughed, and finally the emperor had come to his reason and realized that these were indeed his children, who he had long missed, and who had been raised by the attendant of the gardens. And so with them all he returned to his palace. He restored his queen to her rightful place with much tearful begging for forgiveness on his part. She did indeed forgive him, and all of the people rejoiced to see their lovely queen restored to her station. The sisters had been punished for their crimes and their deceptions, and they instead were put into the same condition, where they would be put into a cell, and all the people who passed by would be required to spit upon them every day. Perviz, Bahman, and Princess Parizade were treated in their rightful sense as princes and princesses. The sisters had been punished for their crimes and their deceptions, and they instead were put into the same condition, where they would be put into a cell, and all the people who passed by would be required to spit upon them every day. Perviz, Bahman, and Princess Parizade were treated in their rightful sense as princes and princesses, and they were raised in the palace from thenceforth, and the kingdom prospered for the rest of their days.